Nazi Germany died in stages in 1945. Stage 1 of that death was the demise of Hitler in his Berlin bunker on the 30th of April 1945. But Hitler's death did not see the end of Nazi Germany. The war continued, and Germany fell under new management by Hitler's design and desire. The new Nazi government was established at Flensburg in northern Germany under Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, formerly head of the Navy, and that survived the German surrender of the 8th of May. In fact, the Dönitz government struggled on under the watchful eyes of the British until the 23rd of May 1945, when it was snuffed out in a British military operation codenamed Blackout. This situation had been tolerated by the British authorities as Dönitz was cooperating in the disarming and placing into captivity the large German forces in northern Germany and Denmark, and Winston Churchill let the charade run for 3 weeks after the German surrender. With the arrest of the Dönitz government, no functioning Nazi government remained in Europe, but the Nazi Party continued to exist and function somewhere far away from Europe. In China, of all places. Since the mid-19th century, the Western powers, led by Great Britain, had fought a series of wars with Imperial China for the right to trade in China and established colonies and special trading enclaves there. The Germans had taken part in this with alacrity, gaining control in 1898 of the Kiautschou Bay leased territory of 213 square miles on the south coast of the Shandong Peninsula in northern China, including the city of Qingdao. However, in World War I, Japan, itself keen to expand into China, fought on the Allied side, and a joint British-Japanese military campaign saw Germany's colonies in China annexed. The German territory was awarded to Japan until 1922, when China regained it, but occupied again by Japan from 1937 onwards. From the time of the Weimar Republic in interwar Germany through to the Nazi era of the 1930s, China and Germany maintained close relations, particularly military relations. German generals served as military advisors to help train the new Chinese National Revolutionary Army, and German firms equipped that army. Later, the Nazis built on that relationship in order to have access to Chinese raw materials for Hitler's rearmaments program. Though Germany had lost its Chinese colonies, many Germans remained living in China, and many more headed out there in the 1920s and 30s. In particular in the famous port city of Shanghai, where I myself lived and worked for almost a decade, and know like the back of my hand. Shanghai was a special place legally. Neither part of China or a foreign colony, it was instead a treaty port governed by a municipal council dominated by British and American businessmen. It had its own police, the Shanghai Municipal Police, and its own army, the Shanghai Volunteer Corps, both heavily staffed by Britons. The Chinese government had no control over foreign Shanghai, itself divided into 2 distinct parts. The foreign-controlled Shanghai I mentioned, a collection of foreign concessions joined together into an entity called the International Settlement, and the French concession, a separate colony of the French Empire run directly from Hanoi in French Indochina. There was also the Chinese municipality, the parts of the city outside of the foreign parts, which were governed by the Chinese nationalist government, which was headquartered in Nanking, now Nanjing. Foreigners of many nationalities lived in both foreign parts of the city alongside millions of Chinese. Until 1918, the Germans had their own concession or separate sector of Shanghai, but of course had lost this following defeat in World War I. With the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, a branch was quickly established amongst Shanghai's overseas German trading community. Once Hitler came to power as Chancellor in 1933, to be German in Shanghai and not either a party member or closely associated with or in agreement with the Nazi Party and its policies could cause you problems, for the Gestapo was soon operating out of the German consulate on the famous Bund, or million-dollar mile of foreign and Chinese banks that lined the riverfront of the international settlement. Shanghai also became one of the few places on Earth where Jews could flee to once the anti-Semitic Nuremberg laws began to take effect in Germany, and later, of course, Nazi anti-Jewish policies were extended to Austria and Czechoslovakia. And eventually, Shanghai would have 25,000 stateless Jews living in a ghetto in the city, much to the annoyance of local Nazis. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale war against China and conquered large parts of the north, the eastern coastline, and the south, committing horrific atrocities against Chinese prisoners of war and civilians, the most notorious being the huge massacres that took place in Nanking. The Japanese captured the Chinese municipality of Shanghai, but not the areas of the city under foreign control, which were neutral. The German Residents' Association organized the local Nazi Party apparatus with the assistance of Joachim von Ribbentrop's Foreign Office in Berlin, and the 4,500 Germans in the city set up various Nazi organizations, such as a branch of the SA, the Brown Shirts, the Sturmabteilung, the Hitler Youth, and the BDM, the League of German Girls. This photo shows something unusual regarding the Hitler Youth and those sorts of organizations. Mixed-race children were also admitted to the Shanghai versions, reflective of the many interracial marriages in the city between European settlers and Chinese. The swastika flag flew proudly from the top of the Glen Line building on the Bund, where the German consulate was housed, and was the first thing stateless Jews would see as the ships carrying them from Europe docked in the city. Following the outbreak of the Second World War on the 3rd of September 1939, nothing much changed in Shanghai, which was neutral territory. The British and the other Allied nations continued to live alongside the Germans and Italians, and though Shanghai became a hotbed of espionage activity, no overt military actions could be taken by the British against the Germans or vice versa. Berlin, however, sent several senior people out to Shanghai to stiffen the loyalty of the numerous Germans in China and to try and intimidate the city's Jewish population, as well as to run Nazi espionage operations in the city and across Asia. SS Standartenführer or Colonel Josef Meisinger, who had committed horrific war crimes as an Einsatzgruppen death squad commander during the invasion of Poland, was sent east by Heinrich Himmler to oversee the activities of all Germans in the Far East and to crack down on any opposed to Hitler, the Nazi regime, or the war. He was greatly feared, and people began disappearing shortly after his arrival, either local Germans or German Jews living in Shanghai, many found floating in the Huangpu River. Another was the head of the Gestapo in Shanghai, Gerhard Kahner, described by the German embassy in Tokyo as a, quote, malevolent, sexually dissatisfied ruffian with an inclination to sadism, end quote. Kahner's job was to observe the Jews and to keep tabs on British intelligence activities in Shanghai. Once Japan entered World War II on the 7th of December 1941, the Japanese quickly occupied the international settlement, and in 1942 began to intern Allied nationals in camps in the city. The Germans in Shanghai, however, remained free, Germany and Japan, of course, being allies, and they wore swastika armbands to delineate them from Allied nationals in the eyes of the Japanese. In March 1942, Gestapo chief Kahner was removed from office and replaced by Franz Huber, a more sober individual with a good police background. The Gestapo had formulated a plan to murder the by now 25,000 Jews living in a ghetto under Japanese control in Shanghai. The plan was to pack them onto ships, take them out into the East China Sea and sink the ships, to leave the Jews to drown or be eaten by sharks. However, the Japanese refused to allow this to go forth, strangely treating the Jews reasonably well, unlike all other Western prisoners that fell into their hands, believing they could use the Jews' mercantile reputation to generate money for the Japanese war effort. As the war came to a close in Europe, the Nazis in Shanghai were either interned, along with German naval personnel who were manning U-boat bases in the Far East, or life continued largely unchanged. So it was in August 1945, over 3 months since the death of Hitler, that the German Residents' Association in Shanghai held elections that fielded both Nazi and anti-Nazi candidates. Incredibly, the Nazi Party won a solid victory, with all but one of the seats on the association's board of directors taken by a Nazi Party member. In effect, this board became the last functioning Nazi government in the world, ruling over 4,500 German citizens in a small enclave in Shanghai. The same day of the election, there was also a so-called loyalty celebration, a Nazi Party rally held at the Kaiser Wilhelm School in Shanghai. SA brown shirts lined one side of the hall and Hitler Youth the other side, with flags and banners flying. An address was given by a diplomat from the German consulate, and a string quartet then played Hitler's favorite march, the Badenweiler March. But within a week or so it was all over. Japan surrendered, and by September Allied forces arrived in Shanghai. The Germans were rounded up and shipped home to their ruined nation, while the more notorious of the SS and Gestapo figures were sent back to face trial for war crimes. The Nazi Party itself was finally outlawed by the Allies in Germany on the 10th of October 1945. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.